my uncle joined the RCMP in 1947. So he was a very young man. My uncles, all of them, really fit that sort of mid-century Mountie, criteria, because they were Caucasian, males, well over 6 feet, all of them, these strapping young men. And Dave certainly, had that down to a T, because he's a very movie star, handsome man. And so as far as they knew, he really fit that mold of what it would be to be a Mountie in the late 1940s and 50s. So he's actually the first member of my family to join the RCMP, and following in his footsteps, 10 other family members, including myself, joined the RCMP. His first posting was actually in Regina, and he was in a crime lab, in a photo lab. And that's sort of where he became a very good photographer. He learned about developing photos, which actually became kind of his legacy towards the end of his career. And now he's remembered a lot for some of the great photography that he took. His real defining part of his career, though, was when he went north of 60, and he went up to the Canadian Arctic, and what's now we know as Nunavut, was Northwest Territories at the time, but he spent his entire career really, really being interested in the Inuit that he met, particularly elders. He contributed a lot to work that was being done on the Dew Line. He learned to speak Inuktitut from people who he was working with, including like the special constables and people from the communities who he developed really good relationships with. And in fact, he was awarded the Queen's Coronation Medal for his service on the Dew Line. And he is noted in the Kikitani report on policing, as a person who really advocated for Inuit. One of the things he brought forward to the government during his service was that he felt that Inuit were being exploited, particularly women, as a result of work that was being done on the Dew Line, and the access that, soldiers from Canada and the US were having, and sort of the impact that it was having on Inuit that were in the area at the time. So, he really loved people. And I think he's very well remembered actually in his service. And a lot of people found it to be quite a mystery and didn't know what happened when he just suddenly disappeared from the RCMP. Dave was devastated by his expulsion from the RCMP, and there's a lot of shame associated with not just the purge, like as it's become to be known, but I mean, like to be known as a homosexual even, or to be a queer or a fag, or this all came with so much shame and stigma. So what I can tell you about what I know has come from obtaining oral histories from members of my family. And in fact, when the government announced its apology, it really is the first time that it opened up an avenue of conversation between me and other family members, in particular my other great uncles and my grandmother, who are Dave's siblings. So I always was afraid to ask these questions, because growing up, most of what I knew was in these like hushed conversations among adults. And another sort of, I guess, double whammy of the entire situation and the tragedy of Dave's story is that he died of AIDS in 1988. And still, I mean, even for myself, I didn't tell people for a long time that my uncle died of AIDS because of the stigma of HIV and of AIDS. And so a lot of that conversation did not come about until 27 years after his death. His life was never the same after the purge. Not only did he lose his pension and his income, but he just never found another career, or, he could have easily went into something like anthropology. He was a very good writer and photographer. But I think that it just really took the starch out of him, to have that happen. He ended up sort of disappearing at one point from our family, and they didn't know where he went. And he had gone to San Francisco. And I only can imagine that he probably went there looking for some companionship and friendship. And, this is the 60s and early 70s after all. So he must have been looking for kinship, and he ended up getting beaten almost to death and had his jaw broken. Ended up coming back and living in Canada for a while, and then ultimately moved down to Houston, Texas. I hope that he went to San Francisco because he found love. And you know, when my spouse and I were in the apology, apart from being like struck and devastated by a lot of the telling by the Prime Minister of the details of the purge, I really was thinking of Dave and thinking like, I wonder, geez, who loved him? You know, he must have been loved, and who did he love? And I hope that love is what really helped him get through